The road to the World Series just might be dusty. Mel Tucker, my homeboy, 7-0 at Michigan State. And the Washington football team, who is the shield really protecting? All that and more coming up on 4th and Justus. Welcome to another exciting edition of 4th and Justus, the dopest show on TV where we look at the intersection of race, sports, and politics. I'm Leonard Moore, your host, Kevin A.B. Anderson, other hosts, and then we got Luke Fedlam, the one and only Luke Fedlam from Columbus, Ohio, serving as your other host today. So thank you all. Welcome for coming. Kevin, Luke, you got any opening remarks for the audience?
I'll just say I'm glad you guys invited me back. I appreciate it.
All right.
Just glad to be here, my man. God is good.
Hey, as we say, God is good all the time. Amen.
All the time.
So, Kevin, let's start off with
the views of Kevin B. Anderson do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense, the Department of the Air Force, or the U.S. government, or his family. The views of Luke Fedlam do not necessarily reflect the views of Porter, Wright, Morris, and Arthur, or his family.
Wayne, thank you for those disclaimers at the beginning. Kevin, we'll come straight to you. Your homeboy, Justus, 72 years of age in the World Series. What are your thoughts?
Well, it couldn't happen to a better person. All this week, if you're watching ESPN, CBS, reading the national newspapers, everybody's giving him accolades. You know, at one time, he didn't get the acknowledgement that he deserved. But, I mean, he went from 18 years ago leading the Giants to the 7th game of the World Series to last night. You know, nobody deserves any more than he does. And winning the World Series would culminate his great career. You know, the other thing is that there's no doubt that he should be a first-round Hall of Famer. And, you know, I just can't speak highly enough of him. Now, you know, I'm biased because he's a good friend. He's the godfather of my youngest daughter. But, wow, you know, anybody you talk to, they'll tell you that he's authentic and he's good people.
Luke, what's your take?
Well, listen, nothing but love for Dusty. I think, you know, what he's doing, it's rare air, right, to be a black manager and managing at that level in the World Series. So I wish him the best. But I got to be honest with you. I've been a Braves fan since I was a kid, man. Since 1991, when they went from worst to first, man, I've just been following the Braves. So I got to say, that was a pretty good game last night.
Hey, Luke, I stopped being a Braves fan. Okay, let me say this. I stopped being a Braves fan, Luke, when they escaped the city of Atlanta and moved to Cobb County. All right.
I hear you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
But hey, Luke, we might not invite you back if you keep on doing, you know, that in Wake Forest. Come on now.
Hey, man, we're all about being honest here. 4th and Justus, let's be honest. So I gotta call it like I see it.
Let me throw this out. We all know that when Dusty took over the Astros, it was a franchise in turmoil, right? And some people say that the COVID year kind of saved them, you know, because of the cheating scandal. Do we see this as another example of an African-American getting an opportunity to lead an organization or a club in a moment of crisis? Kevin, would you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, Doc. And, you know, everywhere he's been, he's done that. When he went to the Giants, he resurrected them. He went to the Cubs, and, you know, although he didn't get to the World Series, his foundation he laid got the Cubs to the World Series in that victory. Cincinnati Reds, you look at his record there, he went to the playoffs all the time. And now he goes and he saves Houston and he gets them out of that mess because you don't hear about it much anymore because Dusty is their leader.
Hey, Luke, let me come to you real quick. Luke, if Dusty wins the World Series, if they beat your Braves, what will that say about the capabilities as African Americans as managers?
Oh, man. I mean, listen, In our community, right, it's going to say this is what we do. We overcome adversity. We are resilient, and we have what it takes to be able to lead organizations to the pinnacle within whatever sport it might be. But let's also look at the facts, right? He would then become only the third black manager in history to win a World Series. So it's not like, we've got a ton of black managers out there. Hopefully what that does is paves the way for other, team owners, et cetera, to be able to say, you know what, let's give some other opportunities here. Let's recognize some people who have earned the opportunity to be able to manage these teams. Hopefully it says that, but at the same time, history has said there haven't been too many of us.
Yeah, it's funny, Luke. You brought up a good. You went to that term, pave the way, and isn't it sad, man, that in 2021, we're still talking in Rosa Parks, Jackie Robinson type terms. You know what I mean? That 2021, we're still talking about that. This may open up the door. Kevin, what are your thoughts about if he wins? What will this do to the possibilities of more African Americans becoming managers?
Well, if you look at the game of baseball, not too many black folks you see on the field. Hardly none in the stands. I mean, there's only two black managers. It's Dusty and Dave Roberts. But you know what was alarming last night when I looked at the field, and if you looked at the umpire crew, there were no people of color out there. So, baseball has gone away from being breaking barriers to creating barriers. And, I think that there's a message in there that they don't care and they don't need us or want us anymore.
And I think at some point we need to reevaluate the whole integration of Major League Baseball, because when you think about the Negro Leagues, not only was it dynamic competition, but it was also an example of a vibrant black business infrastructure. Black folks owned the stadiums. They cooked the food. They sold the uniforms. SCW sold the uniforms. And so it's just interesting how we have a long tradition of folks in baseball. But roughly 60 to 70 years after integration, it seems like we don't have a presence anymore. Let's shift gears real quick if we can. Let's go to the National Football League. And I want to talk about the Washington football team. Congress recently demanded to see a report, the investigation that was done with the Washington football team. The NFL has yet to respond to that demand from Congress. And so the question, Luke, I want to come to you is, who is the NFL really protecting? And has John Gruden been the sacrificial lamb to protect owners and other people in the NFL who probably wrote equally damaging emails?
Newsflash, let me be the one to bring some breaking news here. They're clearly protecting the shield. I mean, that's what the NFL does, right? I mean, we say WFT should really be switched to WTF, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what are we dealing with here, right? And so you've got a situation where Roger Goodell, interestingly, right, was the recipient of some of John Gruden's comments in emails. But what is he doing? He's getting paid $50 million a year to go out and take these hits so that team owners, which represent the league, right, don't have to take those hits. And they pay him handsomely for that. So ultimately, he's there protecting the shield, protecting the league. It's not about protecting anonymity. As a lawyer, I can very clearly tell you that you could easily redact people's names and other identifiable information from these, the documents and everything, the emails, and still release it. They've chosen not to protect the league.
And I've always believed that the cover-up is worse than the original sin. I've always believed that. Kevin, what's your take?
It's definitely a deflection. They brought race in it. They brought sex in it. And, they totally wanted to put this on Gruden and deflect it from what the real issues are and what's in that and how it implies the Washington, whatever their name now is. But, it definitely is. It's switch and bait. And that, they've got caught. And so now we have to see, how are they going to get out of this?
Now, Gruden said the other day, Luke, that the truth will come out. And I wonder what that truth is. What is your prediction, Luke?
Man, I don't know. I'm trying not to listen to Gruden, but so who knows what the truth is? But the truth is, I'm sure that there are more smoking guns. Absolutely. He was the first one to kind of catch it, right? He's the only one that's had punishment, right, in terms of losing his job. There's more to come here. And what I think is interesting is they haven't responded to Congress yet. They haven't responded to the House Oversight Committee that has requested now a lot of these documents and want information into the NFL's investigation. And that's where I think things, get a little interesting, right? When Congress gets involved for whatever, people's perspectives on the efficacy of Congress is, when Congress get involved in these kind of things, people have to respond. And so ultimately the NFL is going to have to respond, and we'll see what comes out when more information starts to come to light in terms of what just is going on at Washington football team. And I'll tell you, we know that it's going to affect more than just the Washington football team, ultimately.
Well, Luke, let me ask you this. Should John Gruden have been fired?
Absolutely, John Gruden should have been fired. Absolutely. I mean, John Gruden, and again, I know we spent a lot of time in our last episode talking about Gruden, and I don't want to continue to give him oxygen, but I'll tell you, this is a situation where he was one person, probably his true self, behind the scenes, and it came out, and it got him, and it absolutely should have. He absolutely should have been fired. When you look at, and here's the thing, and now I'm going to get all fired. You get me fired up, Doc, because now we're in a situation, too. It's also come out in terms of the number of black players and that were involved and front office people that were involved with the Raiders prior to John Gruden, right? And when John Gruden came in and got his kind of football czar status within the Raiders, look at the number and percent of players that decreased with the Raiders organization. So, yeah, he could be saying things publicly, but look at the statistics. The statistics are that the Raiders were one of the teams that had the highest percentage of black players and front office people, and then over the 3 years decreased substantially.
Now, Luke, here's the deal. I don't know if that's so Gruden, because they got rid of the GM, Reggie McKenzie, after he had kind of built the squad. So, but here's the question. Kevin, let me come to you, Kevin. Here's what my students are saying, and this is a good point. How is John Gruden, why is John Gruden out of a job, but Deshaun Watson has not been placed on the exempt list? And what some people are saying is that there's a double standard here, that the white guy gets fired for emails 10, 11 years old, but the black hotshot quarterback, who has to date 26 allegations of sexual assault, is still eligible to play. Kevin, how would you respond to that?
Well, Doc, we're talking about allegations. We're not talking about facts. Haven't been founded yet. They haven't been presented. So, I think it would be presumptuous if we were to just go and look at that. And there's been so many of us that have been, let go or whatever because of rumors and innuendos. So, I kind of want to wait and see what happens and what the facts are. First of all, John Gruden resigned. He wasn't fired. He resigned. So, the question is, had he not resigned, would they have fired him? Now, it's easy to say, well, I would have done that. Well, he made it easy for them. But the other thing is what was his payoff? Because he didn't go out without getting some of that $100 million that was left on the table. The whole thing is that when things come out, they're going to find that, when they looked into the cheerleaders and what they were using the cheerleaders for in Washington, and the rumor on the street is that, there's naked pictures and everything else. And, the people that are on the board of the Washington football team, they were interacting with these cheerleaders in an inappropriate way. So I think if it's ever discovered and if it's ever shared, I think this is going to be damaging not only to Washington, but to the NFL.
Luke, you're an attorney. I want you to put your legal hat on for a minute. If the NFL is a private organization, so how can their email? How can the emails of a private organization be made public? I mean, there has to be some legality around that. Can you enlighten us a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways that any organization's, private information could be made public. And part of it with the NFL, right? The NFL, the league itself, in conducting an investigation, ultimately can request all of, the documents of one of its member organizations. And I'm not as familiar with all of their kind of governing, documents, their bylaws, but, as a member of the, National Football League, the league itself can demand information that they want, which ultimately is why there was a lot of question around, well, who leaked, right? Who actually leaked the John Gruden emails, right? Because it wasn't like, all of these documents were public and a reporter just happened to, come across these emails. They were leaked. And so that's where that issue came up.
Okay, thank you. Shifting gears, let's stay in the NFL and let's go to Mike Tomlin, a product of 757, William and Mary graduate. Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, at a press conference yesterday, was asked if he had any interest in the USC job, and Tomlin basically went off. He said, I have one of the best jobs in professional sports. And he said, why would I be interested in a college job? And then he dropped the mic when he said, does Sean Payton get asked that question? Does Andy Reid get asked that question? Kevin, you've been in the game a long time. Why do you think Mike Tomlin gave such a passionate response? Because he felt completely disrespected. Why would he feel disrespected at somebody asking him if he was interested in the USC job?
Well, Doc, that's a good question. Why would you ask that question to him? You know, I mean, Super Bowl winner, very successful, done a good job. There's only been 3 head coaches with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's been one of them. So, you know, that speaks within itself. One of the things, though, is it shows that these people didn't have a lot of thought behind their questions or had anything meaningful to say to even ask him that. I was fortunate enough to sit down with Mike a while ago, and Mike said that there's no way he would go and coach in college football because he said he wasn't going to raise any money. He didn't want to have to go out and recruit and kiss these young kids' asses, and that, you know, he just wanted to coach ball. So right then and there, I'm sure he shared that with the Pittsburgh media community before this. So again, we have to ask, I mean, what was the motive behind this question? Was it racial or was it stupidity?
Okay. Luke?
I would say that I would add a third category as to the motives behind the question, which is putting people in the hot seat, right? And what Tomlin did was exactly what he should have done. Shut it down completely. Because think about it. If he would have given that standard answer of, I'm just focused on my current opportunity and what's in front of me and our next, competitor, we hear that all the time, right? That's become so standard that nobody believes it anymore, right? And so by answering that way, he would have given that idea, that concept, some life, right? And it only came up because somebody else had mentioned, how Tomlin would be great in that role. So a reporter asked the question, and it's like, he had to shut it down the way he did because it shows the fans, it shows his players, it shows ownership. He's all in. He left no doubt, no question. And let's go back to what Kevin was talking about, right? In terms of his successes, Super Bowl champ. He's never had a losing season with the Steelers. He's never had a losing season. I mean, when you think about it, in the way he kind of talked about, right, this college job and everything, like, absolutely. Why would he go from, he talked about having the best job. He's the head coach who's never had a losing season at one of the winningest franchises. It pains me to say that. I'm an Eagles fan. I don't want to talk about it. But one of the winningest franchises. I know, Kevin. I know. Don't shake your head at me, Kevin. But one of the winningest franchises in the NFL, right? So absolutely, he should have shut it down. And I think he did it the exact right way.
But Luke, let me stay with you for a minute. Let's say Tomlin does go to USC. Let's say they give him $10, $11, $12 million a year. Wouldn't he kill it at SC? And maybe the reporter just asked it out of, maybe wanted a different challenge. I mean, some people don't understand why he was so deeply offended at the question. Kevin, so Luke, help people understand why, as a black professional, he was so deeply offended.
I mean, listen, he was offended, and I think he made it very clear, right? They weren't asking Andy Reid. They weren't asking Sean Payton. Andy Reid's having a struggle of a season this year, right? With the Chiefs, they aren't looking too hot, but they're not asking them those questions. And the fact that, he as a black coach is being asked about this, think about this too. There's also a status level to it, right? It's the NFL. I mean, this is the most profitable, professional sports league in the United States right now, right? I mean, it has been for years. So to then say, hey, what about, a college job, right? It's almost like saying to the varsity coach, like, hey, do you want to go back and coach JV? Now, I'm not saying that college football is JV, but based on the status that, Tomlin has had winning a Super Bowl at the highest level, having only winning seasons with the Steelers, to then be asked that question, it's just like, come on, just because maybe he could go, some booster could pay a ton of money, right, for him to come and coach at college, that all of a sudden he'd be thinking about it? Stop.
But it's deeper than that. He's a Hall of Fame National Football League head coach, a Hall of Famer. And so now we'll go Andy Reid and Sean Payton. I don't think they get into the Hall of Fame. So now we have even another dynamic you have to look at. And so, that's why I think, Mike took exception to that. And, again, it was either because of his race, or it was just because of the stupidity of the media person who asked the question?
Yeah, I think all three of us have been well regarded in our fields. But Kevin, I'm sure you got stories. Luke, I'm sure you got stories. I got stories for days. It seems like no matter what we do in our profession, how exceptional we become, there are still people who want to question our abilities. And I know that's been my life as a professor for 24 years, and I'm sure yours, Kevin, and Luke's too. But staying with college football, speaking of boosters, Kevin, I don't know how you dealt with those boosters as the athletic director at Maryland, man. I dealt with donors in my role as a vice president of Texas. I hated going to those events. I hated the small talk. I hated all the BS. But speaking of boosters, allegedly, it was a booster who probably got Matt Wells at Texas Tech fired. Apparently, somebody just gave $20 million to Kirby Hocutt, the AD at Texas Tech, and apparently that donor may have had some influence in getting Matt Wells fired. They are both eligible. And so I'm trying to find out, Kevin, what are the football standards at Texas Tech where they are firing a coach midway through the season and they're both eligible?
Well, Doc, the reason why I'm not in it anymore is just that I don't want to deal with the adults, particularly the adults who had money and had big toys, and they thought this was one of them, and they treated it like baseball cards and they were trading them. So, I've got a great position now. I'm working with these young people and with these coaches. But the story on the street is, well, it was even on the radio, that this gentleman who gave $20 was in the luxury box with the athletic director on Saturday. They were having private conversations, and then Monday he's fired. He's 5-3, 5-3 with 4 or 5 more games to go. He's only been there 2.5 years. And that last year doesn't count because of COVID anyway. So, I mean, what kind of message does this send to everybody? And, all the money that these coaches are being paid, some of it you can argue because you don't know if you're going to be here today and gone tomorrow. And it's not the president of the schools. It's not the athletic director who dictates all this. It's these board of regents, the trustees, and these donors. And so, when you continue to have that, you're going to continue to have the chaos that we see now.
Hey, Luke, real quick, Luke, when we have these abrupt coaching changes in the middle of the season, Luke, how does this impact the student athletes who are recruited there by Matt Wells?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, on the whole situation, sometimes we see, money talks and sometimes coaches walk because of it, right? And the impact that it could have on student athletes, it's a wide array, right? I mean, let's be honest. So the coach recruited players to be there, right? The players commit to that coach. They commit to that school. Right. They make their decision based on a whole number of factors, but coaching and coaching staff is one of them. So does it impact the players? Absolutely. But that's where, let's not forget about what we're talking about here. And Kevin hit it on the head. This is the business of sports, and in particular, the business of college sports. And so when you have someone, a large donor that's influential, that's contributing significant money to the organization, yeah, absolutely, the athletic directors are listening and taking that into consideration and all that in their decision making. But ultimately, this is where student athletes can be hurt from it, right? They deal with that, right? Because now you've got an interim coach and all that kind of stuff. And we've seen that in we've seen that with other teams as well across college football this season, right? And so then the question is how do they respond? But ultimately they made a life decision based on, this coaching staff. And so, this idea of, and I know this isn't the topic on name, image, and likeness, but this is what fires me up, right? Is that when people are, want to speak out against name, image, and likeness or against college student athletes getting paid, right? And not even just getting paid, like the fact that they don't want them to be able to earn, a contract with a third party, not even the school itself, but with a third party. Right. But then we see this and we see the impact, the direct impact of money in college sports. It fires me up, man.
And I'm just amazed. These people got a lot of money, and it's like, first of all, I am amazed that people want to give to athletics anyway. That amazes me. It's like of all the things you could give to, why college athletics. But to me, it seems like it's not about the kids. It's just about power. And I tell everybody, they're like, well, Dr. Moore, how does this really impact kids? Imagine you go through an exhaustive search for a job at Apple, Facebook, Nike, or whatever. You go through 6-7 interviews, a vice president hires you or a CEO hires you. Then a year later, that CEO leaves. So guess what you're doing now? You, in many ways, are auditioning for your job when a new person comes in. And many of us can handle that professionally. But imagine if you're 18, 19, or 20 having to do that. A coach may have recruited you because of a particular skill set. Guess what? A new coach may want to come in. They may want to run a totally different offense than that's designed for your skill set. That is why I tell these brothers and sisters who are being recruited, go to where you want to go to school at. I know it's hard to separate it from the coach, but you got to go where you can go to school at, because the coach can leave the next day. All right, shifting gears a little bit.
Wait, hey, Doc, I got one more thing. And you hit the nail on the head. The thing is that, so at Maryland, there was a young man who died on the field because of power and control.
Right.
It wasn't anything else. It was about power and control. So now we go, it's deeper than the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since Kevin got another word, let me get another word. It's
Kevin,
power.
Kevin, you left me hanging on that, but go ahead, Luke.
It's power, it's control, and I think it's access, right? And these donors, they want the access. And by making those contributions, what do they get? The access to have personnel changes happen, access to be able to have their name in the stadium, be on the field, all the different things that they get. It's the access to.
But Luke, what they really want access to is the 18, 19-year-old black male. That's what they ultimately want access to.
Well, when they want
got a lot of money, they want to be able to say, yeah, I talked to Brandon, I talked to Takar. They in their circles, since they got so much money, they want to be on a first name basis with these brothers. And I find that interesting, because in any other context in American life, you despise them, you don't want them around, and in many ways you support politicians who promote policies that negatively impact them. So I think that access piece is critical. While we were there,
Well, hey, Doc, the other thing is
go ahead, Kevin.
most of these people are non-athletes. They never played, they've never been in a locker room, and now they get the chance because they have wealth, and now they feel that they could be not only in the locker room, but have influence in the locker room. And it's like, to them, trading baseball cards.
Yeah. Ooh, come on. All right, let's shift gears. James Franklin, his name comes up every year for big-time jobs. He's up now being considered allegedly for the USC LSU job. But Penn State lost 2 games in a row. They lost to Iowa, got taken to the woodshed by Iowa, and then most recently, they lost to Illinois in a 9-overtime game. And I was watching that game on my phone on the way to the TCU game. Now, I'm a Big Ten football fan, Luke, but come on, man, 9 overtimes. And then I think after the second overtime, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just all about a 2-point conversion.
Listen, this is your fault, Doc. I'm blaming this on you. Last episode, you're the one that talked about how you love the Big Ten, ground and pound, right? You want that hardcore running game and all that. What did we have? We had a 9-overtime game, and the score was 20-18. Yeah. I mean, 20-18. But you're right. I think it's after the third overtime they have to just go for 2-point conversions, which makes no sense, right? I mean,
it's one play.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, doing that, that to me lessens. It just lessens. It cheapens the game ultimately. But yeah, I mean, I think Franklin. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where things go. And he's been asked about other positions, and he's given, like we talked about before, that prototypical answer of, well, I'm just focused on, the task at hand. I'm focused on this team, that kind of thing. But we'll see.
I mean, Penn State could literally lose the rest of their games.
Yes.
They got Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. I mean, they could lose the next 3 games, and we'll see what that does to Franklin's stock. Kevin, what's your take on James Franklin? Is his stock declining?
So first of all, Luke, you need to get Wake Forest to teach all those Big Ten schools how to score some points.
That's right. 70 points against Army to stay 7-0, man. 17 minutes on time of possession. That's a lot of points.
Okay. Hey, Luke, we got you. I think what happened with Penn State last week, where they were overlooking Illinois because they play Ohio State this week. And it's easy to say, and it's coach talk, that we are trying to stay focused on this particular week, but we're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. Right. They felt that, and that loss to Iowa really stung them because they thought they really had a chance not only to win Big Ten championship, but play for the national championship. So I think that's what happened. And then James has had some injuries. But here's the thing we have to be asking. This week, James fired his agent and went with CAA and Jimmy Sexton. If that's not a message that he's potentially looking to go elsewhere, then there's no other clues that we can have, I think, better than that.
I tell people, because the one poll said that James Franklin was one of the most overrated coaches in college football. And look, guess what? I'm not hating on that, brother. Get that bag, because we see recycled white coaches get jobs all the time. All the time.
Secure the bag. Absolutely.
Man, get your money. So we got to be careful not to hate, not to fall for the media narrative that he doesn't deserve the USC or LSU opportunity.
Hey, Doc, Doc, we talked about this with Dion. James has sold a brand. He's done a great job of selling James Franklin. So you're right. We can't hate on that, because we see the majority, they're always doing that. And so nobody really says anything or blames them or talk about, well, they're leaving or anything else. So I hand it to James that he's done a very good job of marketing James Franklin.
Awesome. Okay. All right, let's switch gears to my homeboy, a product of Cleveland Heights High School, class of 1990, Mel Tucker. Got Sparty 7-0. Me and Mel Tucker went to the same high school. I finished the year before him. Great brother, comes from a great family. Mel was always a scholar in the classroom and a baller on the field, so it's good to see in many ways how far he's come. Kevin, should Mel Tucker stick it out at Michigan State? He was at Colorado for a year and left. Now he's been at Michigan State his second year. Should he stick it out and stay, or do you think he should flirt with some of these other potential opportunities like LSU?
Well, hey, Doc, the question is that we all talk about loyalty to the players, to the institution. And then if we look at these people that move from one place to another, the only loyalty is to themselves and making money and protecting their family for the future. Mel left Colorado and he got killed for doing that, but now he's 7-0 Michigan State. But when we see the majority and the white coaches doing that, nobody really says anything except the school that he leaves, because they're hurt. But, that topic never comes up. Mel was a finalist for the Wisconsin job, and when they made the hire, they never contacted Mel and told him what was going on or whatever. They just left him in the lurch. So, I mean, you've got to look at this, and I'm going to go back to what Luke said. Unfortunately, this is a business. It's getting closer and closer on Saturday what happens on Sunday. And I think that, at some point, we're going to get there where it's going to be that. So, and that's where it comes in, because, in the past, people went and played at schools and they played for the love of the game, particularly, football, basketball. In a lot of places with a lot of people, now it's about what can I make and what can I do in the future, rather than love and want to compete and play the game. And I want to play for, like you say, Doc, Ohio State. You're loyal to Ohio State. How many of these coaches and how many of these players are really loyal to any of their schools now? And does it come first and foremost? In most cases, I don't think so.
Hey, Luke, how do we prepare, man, these black kids, to really understand the nature of big-time college athletics? They don't understand it. And what I told some brothers on the football team that texted my class yesterday, I said, let me ask you a question, man. Can I function in the streets the same way in D.C. Versus New Orleans? And they say, no, Doc, those are two entirely different places. You got to understand the code of the streets. Luke, do they understand the code of college athletics?
Not necessarily at all, because they've been hyper-focused on making it to the next level. And the people around them, family, coaches, others, have been aiding in that hyper-focused, approach, and I'm not faulting them for that, right? I mean, they're focused on their craft so that they can make it to the next level. And those elite student athletes playing football in particular, right, to be able to go to college and then have a chance of playing in the pros, hyper-focused. So they are focused on their area, right? They don't understand the business side of all of this. And that's where, in my opinion, the education is critical. And here's the thing. We have the opportunity, and I know you do it every day. Both you guys do it every day. We have the opportunity to use the business of sports to actually teach and provide real-world practical education to student athletes, right? So that they can learn and understand business concepts. And I think some of the right coaches are, the better coaches that beyond just the X's and O's help student athletes understand that. But that's so critical. I mean,
Right.
that's everything. And I agree with what Kevin said. This is a business. So coaches, any one of us can say that we're loyal to our organization when we're at the organization. We're all
Right.
in. We want to see, success. We want to win, right? We're competitive. We want to win. But ultimately, we also always have to balance that with doing what's best for ourselves, our professional journey, our families, etc. So we can't fault, coaches for making decisions on the fact that they improve, they get better, they succeed, and then they are able to secure the bag because of their success. No hate there at all. But I do think we have to take this opportunity to be able to educate student athletes on this business side of sports so that they know what they're getting into and they know what
Right.
they're agreeing to, like you said before, when they're getting recruited to schools, that they understand why they're making the decisions they're making.
It's funny. My son is a 10th grader. He has an offer from Tulsa, so he's been on some prospect visits. We had a game at A&M and with TCU last weekend. So the A&M thing was interesting. He's been with me, Luke, and Kevin for 16 years, so he knows how the system works. So we walk in the A&M facility. They give us the little lanyards, okay? They check your name in and stuff like that. And one guy says, okay, the food is upstairs. There's some big screens over there. You can walk out on the field. But first, Kevin and Luke, here's what they said. But first, before you do anything, we need you to come down this way because we want to get your height and weight. Luke and Kevin, that was the first thing we had to do. And guess what they told him when they doing the height and weight? They said, take your shoes off. And when I told him, I said, man, so these people are clear on what this is about. This is about them using your body, your labor, again, to win ball games for them and to make them profitable. And what I appreciated about it is that they didn't sugarcoat. Kevin, what's your take on that, man, making these recruits go give height and weight before they did anything else?
Well, Doc, we've talked about this before. The thing that really has to happen here is that we need more people to help these young people understand that, what they're getting into, because it's a meat market, man. And, they're looking at best physical young man, young woman they could bring into school because they need to be successful, or they end up like our guy at Texas Tech, where 2.5 years and now he's looking for another job. The thing that happens, that has to happen, is that particularly your son has the wealth of your knowledge and what he's seen and what he's heard. So there's things that you can ask these people and point out to him that this is about your academics and your livelihood and what you're going to do in the future. But, there's not a lot of parents out there that come in here with some of these kids and they're concerned, or they know what questions to ask. And they're concerned about, the academics as much as they're concerned about what their son or daughter is going to do on the field. That's the problem too, because if you had young people say, well, I want to be a doctor and I want to take labs and everything else, but I know the practice time might get in the way. So how are you going to solve that for me?
Right. Right. Or you maybe have to go to a different institution. Luke, let me come to you real quick. Luke, here's my dilemma. We'll move on after this, okay, Luke? When we try to educate brothers and sisters on the system, sometimes they clam up. Sometimes, Luke, they get upset at us. And I asked one of my boys, he's a professor at Denison College, Robert Bennett. He said, Doc, you know why they clam up and get mad at you and don't want to talk to you anymore? He said, because basically you are basically telling them that y'all got pimp coming here. Luke, how did you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I got nothing but love for my man, Dr. Bennett, for sure. That's my guy, man. But I'll tell you, part of it is this idea of like preparation, right? And let's think about this for a second, because let's think about what you talked about and what Kevin just said. We used the word access earlier, right? That goes both ways. So sometimes you have family around the player that they get excited in the recruiting process about access. So they're excited to tell their friends, I was down in the locker room. I went out onto the field before this game, right? We see all the pictures on social media, got to meet these, alumni and things like that, former players and all that. So that access goes the other way. So there has to be, and this is, in my opinion, we have to do a better job generally of not just educating the players, but also their parents and family too, right? And that has to come with it. Education around understanding, what should I be looking for? What questions should I ask in a recruiting process? You've been through it. You've seen the inside. You've been in the, in the belly of the beast, if you will. You've seen what it looks like. You know what happens. So you can educate your kid. But what about the other, single mom, right? What about the other parents that have never had this access? If we can't just expect the student athlete to all of a sudden say, oh yeah, absolutely, I'd love to learn about all of this business side of sports just because we said they should, right? There has to be that education along the way as well.
Right.
But hey, Luke and Doc, the other thing, and Doc, this not only, but a lot of these parents are intimidated because they don't have a deep understanding of what you're talking about in the first place.
That's right.
Now they're feeling inadequate and they feel that they can't help their son or daughter. So now they retreat and they're saying, because I don't know what to ask and I'm uncomfortable. So, that's the thing that we have to look at too. And that's the truth of the matter.
And we have to remember that the lifeblood of college football is not the games, it's the recruiting. That is the lifeblood of the enterprise. The lifeblood of the enterprise is those 16, 17, 18-year-old black boys coming out of high school. Speaking of high school, the Los Angeles Unified School District has set a mandate that if kids are going to participate in interscholastic sports, that they all must be vaccinated by December 1, either have one shot or both shots by December 1. Kevin, this is your neck of the woods, and the article the other day said only 70% are vaccinated. So what will happen to the 30% who aren't vaccinated by December 1? Let's say you got a sister playing basketball at Long Beach Poly. What happens to her?
Well, Leonard, we've been talking about this, and I think that vaccination, particularly with these young people, is more access than anything else. If you look in the Black community and the Hispanic community in Los Angeles, they're desperate for good medical service. And so one of the things is I believe that they don't have access. But the other thing is that we've talked about this too, it's being educated, and that, I think all the different rumors and innuendos that go out there about the vaccination, that you're seeing that as well. Now, the easy part about this is that the school district knows this, and so they should be offering and make it more convenient for these young people to get the vaccination. So those are all the questions we have to answer. Why is this? Because 30% is a big number. Big number.
I mean, I wonder if is this a statewide mandate? Is it a mandate for all the employees within the school district, or is just the students? Does anybody know?
I do. So the teachers have been mandated that they have to be vaccinated as well. Now, there's been some union questions and issues with that. So if it affects the adults and they're questioning and it's gone to court, then, it's got to go down to these young people that are participating in athletics, and it should be dealt the same way. Now, as we're saying before, they're putting their lives in jeopardy because now the youngsters in Los Angeles County are having a high rate of getting COVID as well and putting their life in jeopardy.
We'll just continue to watch it, but I believe that by December 1, particularly those brothers and sisters playing basketball and other winter sports will hopefully get vaccinated. Shifting gears, Condoleezza Rice, who some people have said will be the next commissioner of NFL. I don't know what that is based on. I don't know what her expertise is. She made some comments the other day, and we deal with politics on this show. When she was on The View, I believe, Sonny Halston asked her about the Capitol riots that occurred on January 6th. And she said it was time to move on. Luke, your thoughts?
So that's one of those where somebody throws you a question like, oh, man, you could go all over the place, and there's so much to talk about there. I would say Condoleezza Rice, interesting, right? Her experience in politics and everything. She spent, some time in the college football playoff, selection committee and all that. But in this one, she said a lot on that episode of The View. And one thing in particular, and I know this kind of goes, a little different direction from your direct question on the riots, because I don't even want to give that space. It's time to move on. No, it's not time to move on. It's time to make sure that we understand what happened so it doesn't happen again, right? You understand history so you don't repeat history. And given the fact that the primary instigator in chief, who was the one delivering that, ultimately could run again in 2024, then we need to address what happened historically so that we don't experience that again. However, let me catch my breath. One of the things that she talked about, though, that really stuck with me in that interview was on critical race theory. And this idea that we don't need to make, young white kids feel bad about being white And so we should move away from this notion of teaching the realities of what happened with slavery in American history. To me, that was the jaw dropper of it all, because ultimately sharing that and in particular sharing that view of not wanting to teach the realities of American history. That's the realities. We're not talking about is this a subjective perspective? We're talking about teaching the realities. And when we fast forward and look at the state that our American politics are in now, in terms of whether we're believing a lie or believing truths, recognizing lies that people are propagating, or actually believing the truth and reality on whatever it is that we're talking about, Capitol riots, on vaccinations and science, whatever it might be, that is a dangerous place to be if we're not going to recognize history as truth.
Now, Kevin, I know you work with her some at Stanford, but here's the funny thing, Luke, you mentioned about ignoring the history. Is she willing to ignore the history of those 4 little girls who got killed in that church in Birmingham, a church she attended? Is she willing to ignore that because it'll make people uncomfortable? I don't know. Kevin, what's your take on Condi? I know you had some experience with her at Stanford.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. She experienced, and she was right in the midst of what was happening in Birmingham. Condi's a friend. I like Condi, but, I don't agree with her politics a lot of times, and don't agree with what I currently read and saw. So, I'll leave it at that. Sometimes we have family members and we have friends and we don't agree. And so if we can.
Well, Kevin, I won't leave it at that. She's been a sellout her entire life. And what I'm trying to figure out, is it a deep need? When people sell out, is it for deep need of white affirmation, white acceptance? Is it deep self-hatred? I don't know what it is, but I see people, and I don't know how talented she is. I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence of that. And it is one thing, Luke, for people to say, okay, that's not my fight, civil rights protesting, that's not my thing. But it's another thing to actively oppose some of the things Black folks are going for. And that is my issue with Condoleezza Rice. I tell people I can separate the person from the politics, but her politics have been problematic for several decades now, and I think she just needs to be called out on it. Now, moving on to a sister that represents the best of us. Dawn Staley just secured the bag as Temple's women, it's South Carolina's women's basketball coach. She signed the deal for $22.4 million, a 7-year contract. Kevin, what does this say about women's basketball, and what does it say about maybe the future opportunities Black women will get in college athletics?
First of all, Doc, I want to know how you really feel about Condi Rice. How you really feel about her. We were fortunate enough that... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead. Go ahead. Huh?
Fortunately, we were able to have Dawn on, I think, one of our first shows. Now, you talk about someone who's authentic, down, and that's real. She really deserves that. I would want her to teach, to coach, and to lead any of my sons and daughters. She's a phenomenal person, and she's a woman of faith, and I just can't be more happy for her. And that she demonstrated everything she's done and she's touched, she's won. And particularly coming from where she came in Philly, it's just a great story, and it does my heart good that she was rewarded like the way she was.
Okay, Luke?
Listen, I agree. And I agree with everything that Kevin said, authentic, down, real, phenomenal person. And let's just be very clear, an outstanding coach, right? And so, when you look at it, and you mentioned, Doc, you mentioned Temple, right? She killed it at Temple, right? Taking them to, I had to write it down to even look at it, right? She was like a A-10 coach of the year 2 times, regional coach of the year, took them to some first ever A-10 tournament titles and, 4 different years, 5 NCAA appearances, and the list goes on and on and on. When you say, what does it say about her being able to sign this 7-year, $22.4 million deal? It's about damn time, right? That's what it means ultimately for sports, that we have women coaches getting the recognition that they deserve for the programs that they're leading and the success that they're having. What she's done at South Carolina, and just, in terms of their recent experience that they've been able to have and the success that they've been able to have. I mean, #1 team coming into the season. She had the #1 recruiting class this past year. Absolutely, it's about damn time that we're talking about a woman coach getting paid what she deserves. Absolutely.
And let me say this, right before the pandemic, I was doing some work with some banking execs in New York City. And I was just telling them that, that their chief diversity officer is the most important hire. I said, but the problem is y'all hire people y'all don't respect. You hire people who are not authentic. You hire people who tell you what you want to hear. And I said, y'all got to start hiring real black people. I said that to say I appreciate the president of the University of South Carolina for hiring a real sister, a sister who will not sugarcoat anything, and for paying her what she is worth. That is how we need to start measuring, some of these CEOs and executives. Do you have authentic black people on your team, and are you paying them a competitive salary? So I want to give a shout out to the president and the AD at South Carolina. Closing thoughts, Luke.
Yeah, so some closing thoughts. I got to say this month of October is one of my favorite months from a sports perspective. And when you think about this month, we had the NFL is in full swing. The NBA is kicked off. We've got, the WNBA had their championships. Major League Soccer is going into their playoffs. We've got NHL just kicking off. College football is in full swing. College basketball is about to start. This period of time is a fantastic time as a fan of sports. But let's not forget, and hopefully this show, this episode, and others, right, help to bring, a real perspective of the people behind these sports. And when we talk about the people, that's so important because as fans, short for fanatic, right, people can get crazy when it comes to, someone's success or failures on the field or on the court. But we got to remember that they're people. And if we remember that people are people and we remember the humanity of people actually playing the sports, we will give them the respect that they're also due.
Thank you, Luke. Kevin.
Speaking of people and real people, my prayers go out for Dave Latin, or as he's known now as Dave Latine. He was a starting center for that University of Texas El Paso team that won the national championship and was the first team that had 5 African Americans start against Adolph Rupp in Kentucky at the University of Maryland in Colt Arena, where there was Confederate flags flying and being waved while they competed. Dave has Parkinson's disease, and he's not getting better. So my prayers are with him and his family.
For my closing thoughts, it's been an exciting week and a half for the Moore family. We were at Jackson State's homecoming last weekend. Dion is doing some amazing things. The next show, man, I gotta, I'm man enough to admit when I've been wrong, and I've been wrong about Dion. Maybe we'll talk about that next show. But after homecoming weekend, my wife had an unofficial visit with Jackson State volleyball. And typically on these visits, you figure they'll meet with the head coach for 5 minutes, and the assistant coach will do everything. The head coach hung out with my daughter for 3.5 hours, had a photo shoot at the end of the day. And so my daughter will be going to Jackson State to play volleyball. And it just reminded me the best of what HBCUs have to offer. She said, Lauren, I want you to get an internship in the summer. You can go abroad, but understand all my girls who come here to play volleyball, we make sure that they have all the time they need, right, to prepare themselves for life after volleyball. And tomorrow is my son's 16th birthday. That's my guy, probably my best friend, my role model. And Luke, I have the ultimate boys trip planned. Listen to this. Okay. Saturday, we'll be in Columbus going to the Ohio State-Penn State game at night. And then Sunday, we're going to go down to my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, and we'll watch the Browns-Steelers game, and we'll get on a flight getting back to Austin Sunday night, late Sunday night. So I'm happy for my son, happy for my daughter. So it's just been a great week and a half for the Moore family. Well, folks, that's it. Another edition of Fourth and Justus. Join us next week where we're not afraid to engage the topics when we look at the intersection of race, sports, and politics. Peace, and have an awesome week.